Well, welcome back. If you were with me last time around, we had some progress on building out our thruster controls for our Sideshift ST350-D Stern Thrusters that we're adding onto the boat here. But we hit a hiccup when we got over to the starboard side of the boat. So we did all the build on the easy side, as it turns out, first of all, easier side, I should say. And then I got over on the other side. I've wound up in a situation where I just didn't have room to put the batteries. So I've stepped back, regrouped, redone some things, and I'll show you what we've got here. All right, well, here we are back in the closet, and I just wanted to show you that I've got the batteries all in place, strapped down, wired up. Everything's good to go. If I turn on the port side, you can see we get 25 volts here, 24 basically. If I turn on the starboard side, same thing, we get 25 volts. If I shade this a little bit, you can see our flashing transmitters. The other transmitter is over there in that starboard closet. It's flashing, everything looks good. So this solenoid and this transmitter for the other set are over there in the other closet, and there's 16-foot runs of 2-aught cable. Basically these two cables right here on the other side are going across to move these over. So my two open lugs here for the thrusters themselves are still open, need to be wired up once we get those physically on the boat. And now I will not have to extend those. I'll be able to use that existing cable, cut it to length, and we'll be good to go to wire those up. Now, a person who watched the previous video did call me out for not putting battery boxes in. So I did a bunch of research on battery boxes, and I would like to discuss that a little bit. So let's do that. All right, so there was a comment on the previous video saying, hey, haven't you forgotten your battery boxes? You know, that is an ABYC requirement. So I went off and did a little research, and here's what I found. ABYC, for those of you who aren't really boaters yet, stands for the American Boat and Yacht Council. So they create standards that mostly insurance companies rely on to make sure that stuff's built to the proper standards, which is important. But the ABYC standards are built off of, as near as I can tell, the U.S. Coast Guard requirements. So I actually went back to the Coast Guard requirements and read those on batteries. And as it turns out, there is not a specific requirement that says the batteries must be inside of a battery box. There is, if it's a flooded battery, it needs to be in a tray so that the flooded acid in there can't leak out and get around things. And there are also very specific requirements for how securely the batteries need to be tied down. The battery posts need to be covered with those rubber caps so that something can't fall on them and short them out. So there's very detailed requirements as far as that goes. And I don't think I've met those requirements for having my batteries secured enough to meet those requirements yet. So I will be revisiting that a little bit. I think I can, put some pieces of wood along the sides and the backs and between them and whatnot to really have them locked down in place so they can't go anywhere. And then as far as a strap that's holding everything down, I might need to add an additional strap that's maybe screwed down better to the floor and the wall and whatever, that, so just to hold them. So I am going to continue on with securing those things and having them tied down better. And I also am going to put that kind of floor or cover over the top, if you will, to keep stuff from falling down on the batteries and, to make sure that I can use that closet space without having to worry about stuff getting on the batteries. So where does that leave us with the project? Well, it leaves us at the point where we're ready to move on to some of the other installation of stuff that needs to go inside of the boat here. So part of that will be the installation of the joysticks. So this is one of the joysticks, and you can see we've got our two joysticks there. We've got a requirement for a 2.5-inch hole in the dash. So I'm looking at the dash over there. I know where I'm going to put this. It's going to be right next to the engine controls for the transmissions, basically. So that'll be good. I can be kind of working the boat in with the engine controls, forward and reverse, and then if I need to, reach right over, and thruster will be right near to hand there. And obviously then we've got our remote control here that will go with me if I need to step out on the side of the boat. But I basically have one of these for the top helm station, one for the bottom helm station. The one upper helm station has a round hole in it already. It's bigger than 2.5 inches, but it's not bigger than this ring. So it's close to the right size. It's a little bigger than it needs to be, but I think I'm going to be able to make it work. I might have to figure out some way to put something around here to keep it centered in the hole, and then you do kind of stick these down with a little Sikaflex to tie them in place. So I've got these to hook up next. And for the stern, or for the bow thruster, I've got some wiring to go down to that bow thruster and replace some of the existing connections with the connections that they supplied me to get a bow transmitter in there. So all of those wireless transmitters are going to talk to these things remotely. So I've got to start on that next. So I will start on that next. I'll probably do the dashes first, and then I'll get down in there and we'll start working on that bow thruster a little bit. Alright, this is the upper helm station, and here's obviously our existing thruster control, and here's the hole that was already here that our new one is going to go into, but you can see quite a bit bigger than it needs to be. So I'm just trying to see if I can figure out about what we're dealing with here. Looks to me like maybe 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Alright, well, I've got some of this window insulation closed cell foam that's pretty thick, and I wrapped a piece around in there. It's just sitting in there for now, but that pretty much does it. And I think with our Sikaflex holding it down, that might just do it. Alright, so this is where our old thruster control came out, and it turns out that that blonde wood that I bought for my door for the bar fridge area is just about the perfect thickness to fill that hole. So I cut a little chunk of it and screwed that little ring down around it, and I have one of these controls for remote control for the stereo. The stereo is hooked into the Simrad here, so I can control it from over on the side over here when we're underway, but not if the Simrad's not turned on. So I have two of these. One I thought I would use inside the boat, and one I planned on using up here. I haven't really placed it anywhere, but I think that's probably a suitable spot for that, and that will close up that hole nicely and kind of not look too funky, right? All right, well, I've made good progress. I have the bow thruster hooked up to the new controllers. I've tested the bow thruster. It works from upper helm, lower helm, and the handheld remote. I did have it backwards at first, which is a 50-50 chance, so I had to switch the two blue wires or whatever I had up there. So it was pretty straightforward. On the old controller, there was hot and ground, and then there was the two wires to fire the thruster one way or the other. And so there was 4 wires on that they supplied me from Sideshift. So hot and ground and the 2 wires. So, you know, I basically have it so that if I push the thruster button to the starboard, the boat goes to starboard. If I push it to port, it goes to port. So that's how the bow thruster is currently working. Stern thrusters are not installed yet, so I can't test those, but I have no reason to believe it's going to be any more difficult than what I've done so far. I wired the thruster into an existing switch up here on the top, and something I did underneath there where things are all tight and electrical and scary and potential for sparking has done something to the stereo. Now the stereo will turn on but then power off after a minute. So I am going to have to get back in there one more time and see if I got a wire loose or something and I'm not getting enough voltage to that thing, because that is on one of these switches up on the top of the dash there. So that's to be done, but I think the thrusters are at the point now where we're ready to be hauled out for the most part. So I did mention some woodwork and some further strapping down of the batteries and whatnot, and I have a little bit of trimming up to do on those false floors back there. I haven't wired up my 110 outlet for the charger yet, so I got to do that. But for the most part, I think the tricky stuff is done.